and whatever I see is smiling at me. Love is who I am.
So hello there and welcome to this special message. Today I really want to go deep into the creation within the crystalline realms and planting of the seeds that so many of us are involved in on this planet. But first I wish to begin with sharing a little bit something more personal which affects all of us in truth. So as you know, what I share, I have to really again emphasize this. What I share is the ascended illumined truth, which is the unified truth for what really we need to embrace as an illumined being and as a collective of illumined beings in terms of our galactic consciousness, if we want to evolve beyond this threshold where we are now, and if we want our planet to evolve and expand, and we want to move with the expansion of our planet that's happening. Recently, I got a very judgmental letter from someone who somehow complained over my statement of something that I've shared, which I often do as conscious examples. What I share in my stories, in my personal life, and what I experience, and sometimes the people I meet and interactions I have, is simply based on an example. That's all they are. They're examples. They're not judging anyone. They're not saying that someone is better or lower than. They're not about me not understanding the other perspectives. But my role here on this planet as a steward, as a planetary conscious embodiment, a free spirit that came here from higher realms to share this illumined truth, is to work within a unified truth and to share the ascended truth for the ascended version of reality that many souls are matured enough to embrace at this time. Sometimes if people don't have somehow resonance with this, if they have problems with this, if they have personal triggers or issues regarding this, it's not my business. I can't help it, because what I share, it's not about, okay, I share these few beliefs with you here and there, and they're my personal beliefs or stories. It's not about that. But sometimes I also have to come from the approach of what's also dark, what's also hidden and non-addressed. Not just within the light of what has the potential to change, because very few beings who are here as ambassadors of Earth have, in a way, this approach that they will not only share within the light as light workers, but we will also share everything that has ever been suppressed, deeply non-addressed, and also darkened through many of our associations and galactic history and the whole stories and scenarios. So what I want to say is that it doesn't mean that this is a judgment, but this is a discerning approach to what is occurring and what we need to do if we want to shift as a collective, which means that I don't see people as only people. I see people as evolving souls. That's how I see people. I see them on a soul level. So recently, someone who shared this with me said that I don't actually have the right to speak about earthly people this way because I'm just a visiting spirit. I'm a higher being and I don't have rights to do that and talk about earthly spirits in that way. People who are more, rooted through the cycles of incarnation here on Earth. First of all, I want to emphasize that I don't see reality in terms of us versus them, because it just keeps us more fragmented. It keeps us more separate. Secondly, I don't see earth spirits or those who are more earthbound as static, and that's just how they are. That's just how they're trained or used to being and living. No, I see them as evolving spirits. Again, I see them as souls. And thirdly, I want to have a little joke here. I didn't know that people can read me my rights, by the way. What I can do. And all jokes aside, I want to say that we know our purpose. Everyone has a place within the whole. And my place is to often address things within the light and also things within the dark. I need to address both because only that is an integrated polarity aspect. So I want to give this beautiful example of a teacher that for me is a very admirable figure that was incarnated on Earth, and his name is Krishnamurti. And he was also very critical, but he was not critical of humans. It was not personal. he was critical of the egoic component that creates separation, that creates wars, that creates this constant battle with duality and not knowing how to move out. So if we only address the light aspect, we forget that embracing the shadow means embracing all that was ever wrong, because we've utilized the aspect of free will to the degree of no longer being free, because the moment it starts to influence another being in a detrimental or negative way, it's no longer free, because you're imposing your free will upon something or someone else, another being, another entity, and you're claiming that as you have the right. This is your free will. So anything that has been distorted, miscommunicated, misaligned, we have to adjust and we have to address. First of all, we can't know what's wrong if we can't see these things. And this comes, as I've recently spoken about, through embracing the sacredness of life. And this is what I do. I embrace the sacredness of life and I address every single issue that is misaligned with that sacredness. That in itself holds no judgment, no blame. I see people as people. And I get very much overprotective of my space when people tell me what I can and can't do, because it's no one's right to tell someone else what they can and can't do, especially because they're not there. They're not a part of the conversations I'm having with these people. They're not a part of the levels of exchange that needs to take place within us. It's not their mission. It's not their understanding. And they're only approaching it from the level of very distorted reality they're seeing. And a lot of times it's filtered through their own beliefs and projections that were taking place within their own earthly incarnations. So what I share, I need to again emphasize this, comes from the ascended truth. And that truth will sometimes provoke those who feel, well, I can't go into that, or I can't move into that new, or it's too difficult. Because the person said that I don't realize how difficult it is for these earthly people to shift. And that's not true, because I know how difficult it is. I've been here with Earth for eons of time, since the beginning of its creation. And I understand all the galactic wars, all the components, all the manipulations, all the distortions better than anyone else. Because we are ancient spirits who have witnessed this, and we have been teaching throughout the spiritual hierarchies and all these different levels of how light travels as information. And we've been involved with so many numerous projects of the light. And light needs to merge with the aspect that we call the shadow. And what we share is always neutral. It's not based on person levels. But it's almost like if you say to someone, well, if you want to go for a walk, you need to have your shoes on. If you go on a mountain, I don't know. If you want to do it bare feet, that's fine as well. But it's that kind of guidance. It's if you want to change and you want to be part of physical ascension, which is not just transformation, people. It is literal transmutation. It is transcendence that causes the sacred alchemy in your bodies. And there are certain things and principles we need to align with and apply to our physical lives as in a part of the integration movement if we want to change that. And those are the aspects I'm addressing. And these videos are meant for the ascended truth. I'm not here talking about the various realities on this planet, because there are numerous. And I accept and I embrace and I respect all. But my mission is to specifically address the ascended truth. And what I'm shown is, a lot of times, those of you who are here perhaps as volunteer souls as well, on your own light traveling journey and your own sacred missions, you feel you're not being heard, or the level of light quotient and information you're bringing through at this time is not yet understood by the majority of people, not even perhaps in spiritual circles. But what I'm shown is we are planting the seeds. This, at this time, is the seeding stage. So in this next part of the channel message, I really want to bring through the group consciousness and address this. How do we actually work within this crystalline reality? What are the messages of this crystalline reality for us? Because so many people still want the new, but they are constantly entwined with this old reality. It's these old principles we keep carrying lifetime after lifetime. And, like Einstein said, the consciousness that created the problem cannot simultaneously solve it. So I'm bringing you the aspects of what you can shift, that it can shift in overall. And as you're doing this, the light as information travels. And it touches upon everything that wants to be a part of that experience. So recently I was reading about the genetic structuring and the genetic influences on the first human species when they began with their incarnation processes, was how we went from this primitive self-evolutionary primate in a way, you know, which is primordial, rooted, which is a part of the earthly genesis or any sort of other planetary genesis. But as a part of that enlightening or star seed or star family component is this genetic alteration. And people say, well, does it happen physically? No, it happens through light transference. It happens through life force, which travels and touches upon the components of DNA. And this is done through the initiative of the spiritual hierarchy, and those that always want this benevolent development through the, how to call it, different regions of stellar evolution, so different planetary stations that serve as stations for evolution of life, and therefore the evolution of soul. So a part of this earthly experience was a transference of this light. And then you know the whole story. Then there was the fall, because the fall in frequency began to be the dominant reality. What's happening now is because so many were held in this majority of the distorted fallen frequency, they did not know. They don't embody enough light quotient to rise it back up. So I do understand. I do know how hard it is because I understand how creation works. So once so much fragmentation happens, and the soul is so earthbound, they can't, in a way, they feel they can't. They can. But because of this distortion that, you know, creates a certain dropping of that original light quotient occurs, they have a feeling like they can't. And they forget who they truly are. And there's a lot of forgetfulness in this sector of space. So I want to talk again about this. How important is our seeding process, our sacred light alchemy, and this transference of this, what I call the liquid light, and bringing it through the crystalline grid into this planetary structure, because everything is being infused this way. And although we don't always see the physical results of what we share, and it's not always, you know, through verbal approach or videos or blogs, whatever we're doing, in most cases, the core of our mission was to come here and bring the new illumined DNA, genetics, which will travel again through these waves of frequency. And as we do so, we bring back this program that life is sacred, that all life forms are equal, and that all life has to develop simultaneously. So that evolutionary process of one form of life should not come at the expense or, you know, to detriment of another. And this is what it truly means to live within a galactic illumined society. That the galaxy in itself, you know, exists in an ascended form, which for now, we don't know the exact light quotient of the whole, but many of those who have been more existing in duality framework are shifting and moving into the light. And this is all happening because there was this initiative for ascension, because there was a light quotient transference within the divine directive to travel back and to once again share the truth of the ascended reality and how you can be and how we can all be a part of it. So the reason why I can't say, well, this is also true or that's also true, is because the focus here that I'm meant to bring forth is on the ascended reality and what to do to align with it and to embody it yourself. Therefore, I can't talk about things that would slightly make you go off course. I can't do that. Doesn't mean I judge those, you know, swaying principles that get you a little bit off track. It just means I provide that which says, well, this is what you do when you truly choose that path wholeheartedly, unlimitedly, and unconditionally in terms of benefiting yourself and the whole. So let's get through to the message part, where we will discuss this importance of life transference that occurs through many volunteer souls, through the star-seeded ones, and of course how it benefits all life on earth, because truly there is no us versus them. There's just souls and beings of light at different stages of their evolutionary processes. So to say, well, you are a visiting spirit on earth, therefore you cannot be and do those things, you have no rights, is a perspective that excludes. It's a perspective of duality. Of course I see myself as a visitor, but I'm not just a visitor because I'm a co-creator with this reality. I'm doing things, I'm creating things, so how can I just be visiting? If I'm just visiting, I'm just, I'm just a spectator, I'm just observing. I'm not really participating with this reality, so I'm definitely not just a visitor. So whoever thinks those thoughts is making some serious assumptions, and I would like to invite you to create a sacred space within yourself, to not yourself fall into such judgments. So when you have a misunderstanding or misaligning with something, don't judge the person, don't judge the the messenger, because again, remember, I provide examples. I don't judge. I don't use them to teach lessons. They're simply examples, and they're always neutral. So what I'm shown is that giving examples is very important, because it shows us, look, it's really happening, or something is really being experienced. It's not just theoretical. And it gives you an idea of expansion, how you can use certain prototypes, or how you can see yourself, if you're still a part of those beliefs, how can you creatively shift beyond that and create something that's unconditionally loving and compassionate with yourself and the whole, because that's a part of what truly Christ consciousness is. So let's go in with the message and let's see what comes through. Dear beloveds, we're gathered here today to address the topic of seeding life. Life in creation is always being seeded. You yourself, in every moment, you are seeding not only your reality, but the entire consciousness, and putting your original, unique part into the whole. The only question here would be, what am I bringing through into the whole? What am I assisting the whole with? What am I seeding? What am I constantly birthing? There is a majority of beings embodied on this planet at this time who are here to plant the seeds of illumined crystalline reality. They do so in a very simple manner. What they do is being brought forth from the higher realms as it spreads across the crystalline grid, the web of light that is formulated through these crystalline codes. And when they themselves, to their physical embodiment, tune into this crystalline grid, they pick up on that as light, or as light information. What they do is then, through their earthly embodied experience, merge this higher light quotient, is that they actually create a sacred alchemy of earthly experience and what occurs in the higher realms. What this means is that the birthing process is always a creative dynamic that includes many of different facets, many different approaches, many different forms of energy. So why was there such a requirement for these beings to incorporate human bodies at these times, at these very important sacred times of dimensional shift and the overall galactic shift simultaneously? When something is done corporeally, meaning through the embodiment process, it brings forth much higher potential than that which is only being capable of being held at the higher levels. So what these beings came here to do is hold the amount of light quotient that is necessary within a unique individual domain for each participating individual and as a group collective of these light beings. Therefore, each of them has a specific requirement, specific inner work they must do to attain this alchemical process and the appropriate light quotient that is able to create this unbounded, limitless flow and correspondence with this light web grid of light. So this brings us to this understanding of why these beings are so important here and why they need to go and travel into every domain of human experience is not to judge it, is not to karmically connect to it, is not to, in a way, have more experience as a human, but to, in a way, synthesize what has been occurring within this current eon of time, when we look at it from the galactic perspective, and through their embodiment and their assessing of this light information, which again is an infinity symbol connection. So light that travels through the higher realms is being input in the crystalline web grid of light and creates a correspondence with the embodied beings here on Earth. And then as they process this information, they infuse that back into the light grid so that the living system of Gaia can actually physically shift. This is how, through this light transference, they are assisting the process. It is a very complex process that is not so easy to explain with human words. And yet, in simplest terms, this is what is going on. And that is why the physical embodiment process, the physical presence of such a being, is so vital and so important at this time. Therefore, these beings, they're not just visitors. They're not these detached higher beings that don't have any care for the human experience. They're completely engaged with the human experience themselves, because they have merged and in a way submerged into every particle of the human experience, into every unprocessed emotion, into every thought, into ever expanding evolutionary process. They're writing these new codes, these new light codes of this information that travels through these higher realms. So as a beacon, as an antenna, this is how their work is being processed. This is how they operate. Those beings who do not yet now operate from this level through the crystalline web grid of light, that are not a part yet of this mission, that are still in the processing part of the equation, they don't always understand. And you have many beings now who are a part of the younger generation, who have in a way just begun, that are not always understood perhaps by their parents because they're so advanced in what they do, and because we as a human collective have this expectation that the work is always physical. Work equals job. Work equals occupation. In the case of these light beings, their work is their occupation, which is their living embodied essence. They themselves are the work. They embody the work in its fullness of essence. They bring the sacredness of mission to the surface, and they bring an understanding of the highest sacredness of life. Therefore, their missions are so unique and they're not personal. What they share always comes from this collective unity grid of light. They're always associating, they're always relating, they're always engaging. They're not disengaged and they're not disassociated with the occurrences here on Earth. They don't always have to be physically present with them, because that would take so much of their light quotient and its energy into those scenarios, while their energy is needed to seed, to plant these new seeds of life for the new Earth reality. And that is why the majority of them works behind the scenes. The work they do is sacred, and it flows between them and spirit. And it is only a business of them and spirit, because that's how they receive. And no human can judge or evaluate their value, their level of beingness, their level of compassion. Only spirit does, because spirit is their highest employer. They are self-employed in the highest regard of that word. So when those shifting humans who are now ready to also ascend and become a part of this light being family are a part of this process, they will notice changes, because suddenly they will no longer just want to do things. They will want to create things. And there's a big and vast difference between doing and commanding within that doing and actually creating. So a creative process sometimes is very broad, because it's not measured in linear time. Sometimes a creative cycle for a being here on Earth that is of higher advanced consciousness will be even years. For deeper missions that go on greater galactic levels, because there's many levels of these missions and how one can attain them, can sometimes be evaluated in time that is beyond this earthly measure time. So these greater cycles incorporate these beings and their missions, and yet the very value of what they are here to do now belongs to the consciousness of Earth and the living grid of Gaia. Through this work that they do, they're always supported, and they're supported through life force itself. It's because life force is that spirit initiative that holds everything together like a glue, that initiates, that pushes the energy where it needs to go, where it needs to move at its highest potential. What this process requires is the deepest trust. Trust and understanding, and the recognition that one is within this mission, and the knowledge of what they are to do with each task, instead of measuring it through linear time. So because we don't always have on a human counterpart level this understanding, we will say, I'm not producing any results. My mission failed. I'm not receiving the right feedback from others, or people are not shifting the way I would hope so. These higher visions for the evolution of human consciousness and planetary consciousness are the highest visions held on the spiritual hierarchy level. And yet when they travel into form, they will be, going through their own processes, which are interdependent upon a bigger, essence of the whole. What this means is that the level of light that one is to bring through cannot have an expectancy date or a due date, written on it. They simply need to follow through what the light wants them to do, to be, to create in this very moment. And knowing that with each such choice of that alignment and the receptive and the co-creative stage of this intercommunicative process within the crystalline grid is setting off a new spiral of life. A new spiral goes out. So let's talk about the addressing of shifting certain human patterns that are, smaller patterns that each human will individually experience, and then bigger patterns that we experience as a collective. So we watch one of these beings who, let's say, they have decided upon to shift a certain pattern, and for a few years they will work only with that collectively. When they will know this mission is complete, they will feel a very neutralized feeling. They will feel a level of joy that comes from that experience, independently from what is occurring in the physical reality, in the sense of this actually produced physical results. This will be an inner knowing that something shifted. There has to be trust associated with that. And then moving on to the next mission, to the next assignment, with flow, with higher guidance directive. And it is as simple as that. Because when all resistance is dropped, surrendered, when there is only the understanding of sacredness of life and how it always guides one into the highest expression of their mission, everything will perfectly flow. That doesn't mean there won't be challenging aspects, because the world responds to this new energy in a unique way. Sometimes with more frustration, anxiety, judgment, fearful reactions, and sometimes with great joy and saying, yes, I want to be a part of this. So the being of light who is a part of this sacred experience and light transmission cannot truly have, all cards in their hands. It's not only up to them. They're the ones to shift the energy. How people respond, how the collective shifts is no longer in their hands. It's in the hands of the divine and every unique individual soul contract that each being has within their own connection with the spiritual hierarchy and their own divine plan. So within the greatness of divine plan of all and the perfection flow, we ask that every being now who is ready starts to imagine this beautiful light grid, this crystalline grid of earth, of new earth, and daily ask for their tasks and assignments. And they don't have to be something big, because every bigger major cycle in creation is built from tiny little cycles that are each just as important, because without them there wouldn't be bigger cycles and bigger scenarios. So the sacredness of life, and embracing that, and embracing the greatness of each conscious deed, because it's not how big of a deed it is, but how consciously it is done and performed through the act of grace. So we invite everyone to start participating with life more consciously in that way, in a way to form a relationship, a union with this crystalline reality, and start receiving guidance from there. We have recently shared this very important meditation where each being that is ready can start daily sitting with their own higher self, with their master. So it's very simple. You merely imagine yourself sitting somewhere on a beautiful bench or a chair, whatever you prefer. It can even be on the ground, like we're sitting now, and invoking the inner master, the inner teacher, to come and guide and sit with you. Imagine this great white light and that being in a beautiful nature surrounding wherever you are, whatever is of your preference comes to you. And you're simply observing that being, and you're not seeing them as separate from you. And there is beautiful communication and relationship forming, and they sit next to you. You choose the side where they sit. You just see, you just observe with your inner vision. And you can ask the inner master any sort of question. Not a sort of yes or no type of question, because that is rather limiting. It is not a conversation based on mastery and expanding perspectives. But just ask for expanded views on whatever you're currently moving through. And you will see what a deep impact this will have on your reality when you start implementing that in your practice. And you will start seeing things coming together, just aligning more and more. Because you're the one that's putting the pieces of the puzzles together. So, we would like to thank you for listening to this message. And we'll see you. We will see you soon again in divine timing. With love, wisdom, and power. So, dear beloveds, remember again that no one is here to enlighten someone else. We're not here to personally make people shift or embrace this pathway of ascension that is forced upon them. We only bring through the essence of enlightened illumination into this plane of reality, to merging as one with the crystalline liquid reality, translating that as pure radiant life force into the living reality that is manifesting now here on this beautiful planet, as sacred guardians and keepers of the flame. So as we walk about our daily realities, let us remember that every breath of life, every step we breathe, we take, we merge with, every choice is sacred, as all life in creation is sacred. And when we stop judging others or perceiving that we know what is right or best for them through our own eyes of perception, and only focus on ourselves and our dedication to the sacred path, we truly become a neutral, divine loving being that is embracing the Christed light of unity, completely neutrally polarized within themselves, as an illumined being that is constantly birthing something new into life. So it begins with you. It begins with each individual, birthed through their own uniqueness, completely self-illumined and realized, and then it spreads out into a vaster whole. So through the perception of those selected few who are choosing this reality and are holding this light quotient potential, this then spreads into the multiple realities, into the multiple personalities of Source that all beautiful soul beings are. So even though there might be resistance on the surface, beneath that, deep within, is an angelic guiding force for all, for everyone of the light, joining as one family of the light, as the light tribe, as these beautiful flowers on the meadow here represent. So each spark is catching the flame of illumination and uniquely translating that light into their own creative process, into their own merging component of their own reality, and yet they're connected through the crystalline reality and the liquid light of Source. And so, the Divine thanks you for being a sacred vessel for Spirit and for partaking with this sacred life task given upon you, shared through you, always birthing something new. And therefore it is truly important that you ask yourself through each situation, choice, matter at heart, what am I truly birthing as I engage with this process? And therefore you become a fully conscious being of light, embracing everything as your own sacred responsibility, seeing the world not dependent upon you, nor you are dependent upon the world, and yet you are at complete full union with the world at large, without any exclusion, fragmentation, or separation. And there you are, standing as the pillar of light. And there you see your fellow components, your fellow travelers of light. And you intermingle in this beautiful sacred dance of joy and passionate living in this now moment, planting the seeds into the soil of sacred Gaia, into the body of sacred earth, illuminating your own body as the crystalline light force formation. So be it, and so it is.